Trump's executive orders, too much or just right? Let's spin. Welcome back. I'm John Alaska. As always, I'm joined by Hannah, Jesse, and Tiffany. So today we're going to talk about Trump's executive orders, specifically on immigration. So this is from the New York Times. It's our top headline. President Trump's executive order on immigration indefinitely barred Syrian refugees from entering the United States, suspended all refugee admissions for 120 days, and blocked citizens of 7 Muslim-majority countries, refugees or otherwise, from entering the United States for 90 days. Now, President Donald Trump has issued 18 executive orders, which is compared to 19 under President Barack Obama in his first 12 days. So what do we all think of this?
Who wants to start?
Well, I think that his executive orders are in the country's best interest.
Yes.
One could definitely argue that. Although it is broad, he says, hey, this is to protect American citizens. Like, that could be generally anything.
Yeah.
But the order in itself is in the best interest of American citizens. But the only issue I have with it is that it wasn't prompted by anything. There wasn't anything, that just prompted, hey, let's ban all these people from all these countries. Versus when Obama's ban in 2011, it was prompted by something. So
I disagree with that. I think it was prompted mainly by the terrorist attacks happening in Europe, especially in France and Germany, which we all saw happen. And most of those terrorist attacks were the direct cause of terrorists going in as refugees into these countries and then killing tons of people. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's what prompted President Trump to create this ban.
But even the countries that Trump did ban from traveling had no attacks on American soil.
That is true.
The countries that have had attacks or suspicious attacks aren't even on the list at all. So I think that's problematic because if it's at the best interest of American citizens, you would think, like logically, it would be the countries that have had more suspicious interference.
And Europe, I think Europe's problem is that a lot of the terrorism from there is happening from refugees who just go there and then they get filed through and they get rejected. And so they don't deport the refugees that do get rejected. And that, I think, is a huge problem. But I think going back to what you've said, there have been 0 terrorist attacks from these 7 countries, which are Iran, Iraq, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, Syria, and Yemen. But I mean, if we're looking at where terrorists come from, it's places like Afghanistan, it's places like Saudi Arabia. But we have business ties as a country, but also I think Trump has business ties to those. So I think that, and until he releases his tax returns, we'll never truly know, but I think it draws suspicion as to why, if we really want to protect the country, we don't go into harsher things for those 2 countries.
Yeah. The thing I would say is, yes, I believe that Saudi Arabia has a huge terrorist issue, which we should be looking at. I think these 7 countries were listed mainly because they were the top 7 countries in the Obama administration that was targeted as, these are the countries you need to look out for. And I think because this executive order was passed so quickly, and I disagree I disagree on how fast the order went by. There should have been a lot more order. There shouldn't have been so much confusion. I think it should have passed slowly. And I think they just picked these 7 countries because these were the top 7 countries that were on the watch list. I think that if they really looked into it, they would have added those countries.
Going off of that, I think if the order went through a process rather than just an abrupt change, that would have been a lot better. People would have been so mad about it because, I mean, even American citizens who traveled to those countries and tried to come back home couldn't come back home. And now for however long, they're not going to be able to return and go back to their jobs, their family, their pets, And I just think that he needs to reevaluate this whole situation and kind of find a more comprehensive way to make it more effective and not interfere as much with innocent people whose lives are now going to be turned around because of that.
But the whole point of an executive order is that it does happen quickly, and it does happen, without a lot of scrutiny. And be it as it may, maybe Trump should have evaluated it more for constitutional errors, because Sally Yates, who was fired because she disagreed with the policy. She didn't think it was constitutional. She was fired for that, for defying him in Trump's words. But the ban itself is a travel ban, and it does bar immigrants and tourists from coming in, which is what makes it different from Obama's ban, again, because it said from ABC News in 2013, Obama's administration instituted the policy following the discovery that 2 men suspected of making bombs to target American troops in Iraq were living in Kentucky as refugees. So that's the point I'm kind of making. There is a direct reason for Obama to say, hey, we are going to slowly process these refugees from Iraq for 6 months, but it wasn't even a full travel ban.
Yeah. I think Trump, what his idea and what his policy is trying to state is that they want to sort of shut everything down and look at the full process, see how the refugee process is going and what is there that we may not know. Is everyone being vetted properly? Are we letting people in that shouldn't have been let in? I think he just wants to make sure that we truly look deep and thoroughly into the process, and then, like we said, it's not a permanent ban, a, say, 90-day ban for these countries.
But even with this whole travel ban, I think the biggest issue is ISIS is our biggest threat right now with terrorism. ISIS is not an organized state. It is spread out everywhere throughout the world, really, and they're connecting mostly through social media and through online gatherings and stuff. If we're trying to stop that specific group from terrorizing our country, we need to kind of look more into the internet, more into certain kind of concentrations of where these people are, because if you ban 7 countries, okay, there may be some people from ISIS in those countries, but there's been American citizens who've gone out and tried to join ISIS and try to rise terrorism in our country.
Well, that's the biggest problem, is that most terrorism attacks that happen on U.S. soil happen because people are homegrown radicalized. They are born in America and they're radicalized through social media or other forms like that. But I mean, the refugee program itself, there's already extreme vetting. It takes up to 2 years. And then U.S. gets, if you're a refugee, the country gets preferential treatment. You don't get to pick where you go. So America's preferential treatment is for women and children. And I don't think little children are coming in with bombs trying to be terrorists. But I think where we need to look is that the U.S. has a visa program with Western Europe that is much easier to get into the country. And if we are looking at where terrorists could come in, it's there because there isn't as much scrutiny. It's not up to 2 years. And if I'm a terrorist, I'm not going to wait 2 years to get into the country to plan a terrorist attack. That's the difference between us and Europe, is that Europe, it's much easier. Just get on a boat. As opposed to here, I mean, you have to, there's, albeit more border security, and I mean, we're just more isolated.
And according to Vox magazine, the world faces its biggest refugee crisis since World War II. And America has been the world's leader really in resettling refugees, and 3 million refugees have been resettled around all 50 states since 1975. So this is a huge deal because we have this whole influx of refugees coming in, trying to kind of scatter around and find new homes because they're in danger. And with this whole travel ban and this whole executive order going through, it's going to change the whole process of how we resettle these people who are innocent and who need new homes and need safety.
Yeah, well, I'm not arguing that refugees should be banned completely. Trump said that he would let 50,000 refugees in, which is the standard. If you look at President George W. Bush, he let in less people. And if you look at President Obama before 2015, he let in less people. And in fact, he let in only 20 to 30 refugees from Syria. Up until that picture, that poor little boy, and people were finally aware of what was happening in Syria, that was when we finally started letting people in. And I think that, and those numbers rose exponentially. It was in the hundreds of thousands, not hundreds of thousands, but in the thousands. And so I think that what Trump is trying to do is not go back to the 20s and 30s, but go back to maybe saying maybe we shouldn't let so many refugees in. Maybe we should really just look and not just say we're letting all these people in.
Well, like you said, it's the standard. He said he was going to admit roughly 50,000 people, which is the same thing Obama has admitted in the past, with the exception of 2016. So, I mean, in the plain language of his executive order, doesn't apply to legal permanent citizens in the U.S. And I think a big problem and why this is receiving so much hype is because people are so quick to believe what they're seeing on social media. You know, there's no fact checking involved with a Facebook post. There's no, and people can read a headline and, you know, have a change of heart. And I think that that's really what needs to be analyzed here is like, why are these people so brainwashed? Why are they sharing facts that aren't right, or, you know, alternative facts like Trump says? But and why are they doing that?
Yeah.
Well, I think there is a problem with, I mean, the initial messaging was including green card holders. That was true. And then Reince Priebus went on and said that, you know, now we're not going to include green card holders. I mean, people, anchors on the news were confused because, I mean, the way that this was rolled out. So I think we could call it brainwashing, but I think we also have to realize there was significant confusion with this law because I think it did not go through proper vetting with the DHS. It did not go through other departments like a typical order that affects national security would. It was written in kind of typical Trumpian language, and I think that is confusing for newscasters, and I think for laymen already have problem understanding legalese. So I mean, but I think people have a right to be angry with this because at the end of the day, I think it's just the wrong thing to do. I think these 7 countries have no reason to necessarily be banned. I think a much smarter approach would have been, okay, let's work with Congress and let's find a way to better do this than just banning for 90 days. Because I'm going to guarantee you that this is going to be banned for 90 days, but nothing with Congress is going to go through. Nothing with DHS is going to go through. It's just going to be this 90 days that's going to end, or maybe it won't end. Because I think Donald Trump does not have the governmental experience to know what to do after these 90 days.
Well, the 90 days was set in order for them to be able to make the vetting process better. That's what the 90 days time is allotted for.
Yeah,
so that
they have
can
time.
improve upon, you know, the vetting system and letting refugees in the future.
But I don't think there's necessarily a way to improve on this vetting system because I think they're going to try to find ways to improve on it. But I mean, it's already so scrutinized. There are many layers to go through if you're a refugee to get in. And most refugees from places like Syria are educated. They have jobs from before. They have all the correct papers because, I mean, up until Assad came in, Syria was not a necessarily undeveloped country. So I think they're going to see that finding places to improve the vetting process is going to be much harder than they think. And I don't think anything's actually going to come from this.
Well, then in 90 days, if nothing has changed, then nothing has changed, and it will go back to the way it was. But if Trump does see, or if the administration does see there is some problems, then that will change. I think that, I mean, it's only for the better safety of our own country. I think that, like I said, 90 days, if they find nothing's wrong, if they see that, okay, things are up to standard, then nothing will change.
But then I would argue that this actually isn't in the best interest of our country because, I mean, we've already seen ISIS uses this type of thing for recruitment tools. If a senator or a congressman goes on Morning Joe and says, we are at war with radical Islam, they are going to use that in their recruiting tools. We've seen ISIS already does this. And I think all this does is bolster ISIS's sort of recruitment mechanisms. And I think the 90 days thing, we're going to have to see. And on our next episode, we will see that. Thank you.
Everything you said we already knew, more or less.
Well, here's something that you didn't know. 2 of those special atomic bombs haven't gone off.